Readers get asked where the stories come from. Back in Victorian times, it was almost impossible to prove a person's identity. DNA tests and fingerprints were unknown. At least adults who disappeared usually knew who they were, but not children. Enslaved children, sold away from their parents, might have only a child's recollection of where they came from. After the Civil War, thousands of people roamed the roads looking for their parents and children. Later, during the attempt to separate Native American children from their heritage, children were given new names, separated from their families, punished for speaking their own language. Only now, using DNA, are some of those wrongs being righted. It wasn't uncommon for other children to disappear, stolen to be used as servants, or sex slaves, or murdered. The first white child kidnapped from many was Charlie Ross in 1876. Charlie was 4 years old. His kidnappers, frankly, were idiots. For instance, they told Charlie's father to put the ransom on the steps of the railroad station in Philadelphia, which has 2 railroad stations. You can imagine what happened. Eventually, they committed a robbery, and they were both shot. One of them died instantly. The other one lived a short time. "We kidnapped Charlie Ross," he said. "Where is he?" the policeman asked. "Ask Bill," but Bill was already dead. Charlie Ross was never seen again. His father looked for him lifelong. It tortured him. What if Charlie had forgot who he was? What if he'd been left in the hands of people who called him by another name and said he was their son? What if he believed it? What if he thought his family had abandoned him? In 1939, 65 years later, a man named Gustav Blair claimed, "I am Charlie Ross," and wanted some of the family money. By then, Charlie's parents were dead. His brothers and sisters were old. There wasn't any question of money. The brothers and sisters didn't contest Gustav Blair, and the last we heard of him, he was on his way to Hollywood. I heard about Gustav Blair first from George Gloss, father of Ken Gloss, who was on Antiques Roadshow. I was in his store one day, and he took a copy of The Kidnapped Child off the shelf and said, "You should read this. You're interested in Victorian crimes." The weird thing was, I wasn't, not at the time, but always trust a bookseller. What got to me was the breakup of families. How terribly the families suffered. A college friend of mine doesn't even know one of her relatives before the Civil War. A family member knows she has a Native American background, but she doesn't even know what tribe. We had a relative who disappeared in the 19th century. Didn't know at the time what had ever happened to him. When a family breaks up, the people in it break up, and there's a need to find those missing pieces, those vanished people. A good way to start a story is to say, what if? What if there were a question of money? What if the vanished child were rich? Coming back 65 years later is funny, but what if it were 20 years? When the family he left is still alive, but have got used to having him gone? What if only one person in the family still really cared? What would the child think about going back to all that? What if the child saw a murder? And that's where the vanished child comes from.
Thanks for watching from Sarah Smith and Crimes and Survivors.